Kia ora. Hello. As we all know that part of the process of building an impression is a constant improvement and refining of the said impression. As we research, we learn more about the dress, arms and armour of the people we are depicting. This week we will be visiting an old series here on this channel, as I am again working on my impression. That impression is of a 14th century militia captain, or more specifically, a Flemish burgher knight from Ghent in the year 1390. One of the more characteristic representation of knights and men-at-arms in art from this period is not of a person wearing uncovered armour. It is instead to have the armour covered by either a quilted jupon or to have another kind of garment over the top, this being either a heraldic coat or, again, a looser gown, often with bagged or open sleeves. It is this latter garment we'll be discussing in this video. This garment, its name and its construction has been something of a mystery for me for quite some time. This gown is not commonly depicted on funerary effigies and brasses. It is heavily featured in much of the art during the last 20 years of the 14th century. When trying to research the correct name for the garment, I too have had hurdles, since both modern and medieval people have different naming conventions for garments, let alone the problem that medieval people named garments different things depending on regions and languages, much like we do today. So trying to pin this one down has been difficult. Is it a jupon, an arming coat, a gown, hoopland, kirtle, or surcoat? Or none of these things? While it does have many things in common with the latter period arming gowns, waffenfrocks, gioniers, and the journard, I feel it is the predecessor of all of these garments. While I have much to say on why it is not any of these other garments, I think it is better and more succinct to say it is more reasonable to call this an arming coat, although that's speculative. But as I need a name for the garment, this is what I will be running with. If there is anyone out there who has a solid lead on what it should be called, please comment below. The trouble in pinning down a correct name has caused issues in trying to find written references to what I was reconstructing. As there are no extant arming gowns to recreate that I know of, I'm venturing into what I feel is a speculative reconstruction instead of a recreation. Many of the elements I have used in the reconstruction of the arming coat are drawn from other medieval garment construction techniques and extrapolations from art. I hope in this episode to discuss my construction methodology, look at some different depictions of the coat in art, as well as a brief look at how it performs when worn in combat. As always, if you want to know more, all of our links and sources are below. I'm Andrew, and this is Popula Urbanum, a show where we discuss reenactment and the medieval middle class. Let's discuss the depiction of the arming coating art and how this informed my garment design. Now I know I am the first to say that we cannot trust art as our only source of information when building an impression. This is true. But as I have previously stated, this was a difficult garment to research due to the naming problems and whatnot. I was forced to rely heavily on art, more so than I normally would. Naughty. In this case, I approached as many possible and different artistic representations as possible to get an idea of the construction. One of the manuscripts I relied heavily on while reconstructing the arming coat was the Chroniques de France de Denis, dated between 1380 to 1400. In this manuscript alone, we see many kinds of garments being worn over armour. Specifically, we see many depictions of a long gown ending just above the knee, with wide sleeves being worn over armour. The arming coat is often depicted in conjunction with quilted garments being worn at the same time in the same image. This led me to believe that we are seeing a loose-fitting garment with large amounts of fabric so to hang in folds, as opposed to representing quilted garments. Looking at different sources from the period, of 1380 to 1400, we're able to see that the arming coat is not just unique to this manuscript or the French style. We see that this is depicted across Northwest Europe at the very least. As with many fashions, especially over a 20-year period, the design and ways the arming coat is worn and depicted vary. Sometimes it can even be presented in different ways in the same piece of art. This leads me to assume there is no right way to make it. I will run through some brief variations that I've come across during my research, discussing some trends as to present an idea of how I came to my construction. An arming coat can be shown as being belted at the waist with sword or dagger hanging from the belt. Though, more often it is left unbelted, hanging loose, sometimes with a magic dagger floating from the side. Other appearances, we can see a small slit being depicted on the side of the coat in which to provide access for the sword, which could be worn under the coat. Mostly, the arming coat is shown to be of a single colour in reds, blues, yellows, and greens. But there are depictions of the arming garment being sewn in brocades. As for sleeves, they are generally long and bagged, although we do see open sleeves and short sleeves, as well as longer and more elaborate ones with dagging. There are examples of coats which have a slit at the side to the hips, which might be for horse riding, as the span of the fabric does not hinder the movement of the legs. Many of these coats do not show a front fastening, although this one shows a lacing at the neck, while this one has buttons all the way down the front or to the bottom of the hem. It is important to add that as the 14th century starts to move into the 15th century, there are more depictions of the arming coat being worn with a breastplate over the top. This also appears to be a fashion adopted earlier in the Holy Roman Empire. I would also like to add that I'm dubious about the use of the arming coat by the English as a fashion trend. I'm yet to be convinced this was entirely adopted by them. Instead, they appear to have preferred the quilted jupon or the heraldic surcoat during this period. Again, I may be wrong, and would love to hear your thoughts on this. When it came to my arming coat, I decided to construct an 8-panel, knee-length gown with bagged sleeves. The sleeves were to have the cuffs buttoned closed with 2 fabric buttons. I was originally going to have the front closed with buttons to the hem. I changed my mind nearing the end of the project when I calculated I need to make about 50 buttons. Instead, I chose to close the neck with buttons. After some research, I saw a similar depiction on the effigy of Guesclin, closing the neck up with just 3 buttons, saving myself a lot of work. When selecting a fabric for the arming coat, I went with a grey, tight woven, heavy suiting weight twill, which we then dyed red. This is a very dense fabric, though not thick like a Melton or a broadcloth. By using this, I'd hoped to have something that was robust, but would still achieve a similar drape as the depicted garments. When it came to patterning, we adapted the N63 Greenland gown, making it oversized in the chest, upper back, and shoulders, specially to fit over my armor. For the sleeves, we fit these on the body with a toile with my mail on to make sure there was enough room in the back sleeves. I would have hoped to have had my arm harness on in the stage too, but as I'm still in the process of building this, we had to make some generous guesses. We did make sure to add some generous gauze in the back of the sleeve head to ensure a side range of movement in the upper arm. This is important to ensuring that if the arming coat is belted at the waist, you will not be hampered when lifting your arms, as well as giving additional space for any armor you might have on under there. All seams are sewn with a simple running stitch, except where I felt that reinforcement might be needed, such as the armpits and at the top of the shoulders. Here, I used a back stitch. I've also felled all the seams to stop frayed edges and to strengthen all of the seams. The sleeve cuffs are closed off with 2 fabric buttons, and the neck is closed off with 4 buttons. These buttons are roughly 1.5 centimeters wide, or just over half an inch. As I've also faced the buttonholes with a strip of silk, I did not face the neck because it rubs against my pisane, and I thought the silk would wear out too fast. If you want to learn how to sew any of these stitches, or to see how we make our buttons or buttonholes, I've included our Medieval Sewing Made Easy playlist here and down below, which covers all the basics for you. An alternative way to reconstruct the arm and gown is to make this a 7-panel garment, with the front as a single panel with a small slit in for a strip of buttons for the neck opening. This would result in a no front seam. You could make this as a slip-on garment without any fastenings in the neck, though this would result in a larger neckline. Finally, let's have a good look to see how the arming coat looks on me and how it acts in combat. Full disclosure, I'm missing my mail at the time of filming because I'm having the sleeves tailored, so I will only be wearing my breastplate, pisane and helmet, as well as gauntlets obviously. First we can see the fit and drape of the arming coat while loose. Notice that it comes just above the knee in height. I may have made it a little bit too long, but I think if I have my mail on underneath this, it will raise it up some more. I can always raise the hem if I need to. And here, while it is belted. As you can see, when belted, the extra fabric folds around the waist and the body. This in no way hampers my movement. This is important. Also, the hem is raised slightly. Here, we now can see how the coat moves in some simple combat. You will notice that the looseness does not inhibit the movement of the arms or legs. The idea behind the arming coat is to cover the armor, but still allow the armor to function. I've heard it suggested that the arming coat might make combat hard or be difficult to move in while fighting. This has not been my experience when fighting in loose-fitting garments. Granted, our sequences are not in any way high intensity. They are instead meant to demonstrate how freely you are able to move without hindrance. So take from this what you will. I'm not at the stage able to say if this will make any difference in how much hotter or cooler I'd be in my armor, since it's winter here right now and I've not worn my armor and a coat in the heat. I can hazard a guess and say yes, I would heat up faster, since it is an insulating layer. I also cannot say why this was worn. Perhaps this was just fashionable. Maybe this had a function beyond just fashion. I have some thoughts about that I've not yet formed into a coherent idea yet to discuss. I still need to do some testing, but you all know I will talk about it once I've figured it out, because I will do a video on it. Hi, you're still here. That means you enjoyed the video. Remember, like, comment and subscribe. And stay safe, have fun, and keep reenacting.